Welcome to the Tundra!
The name tundra comes from the Finnish word Tunturia, meaning treeless plains. It covers expansive areas of the Arctic, which is in the northern hemisphere. The tundra makes up nearly 20% of Earth's land surface. It is the coldest of all the biomes, with a low biotic diversity, simple vegetation structure, and short seasons of growth and reproduction. The most distinctive characteristic of the tundra soil is its permafrost, a permanently frozen layer of ground. On Earth, there are three different types of tundra: the Arctic in the north, the Antarctic, located in the south and consisting of 98% ice, and the Alpine tundra, which is located on mountains at elevations above 11,000 feet. This is a food web of many common organisms in the tundra. On the bottom, there are 5 plants. These are lichen, moss, sedge, grass, and shrubs. These organisms are autotrophs, which are capable of synthesizing their own food from inorganic substances using light and chemical energy. These producers are consumed by herbivores such as caribou, musk oxen, lemmings, Arctic hares, and pikas. These organisms are heterotrophs, meaning that they are incapable of producing their own food and must get their energy by eating other organisms. As energy moves further up from the food chain, the smaller herbivorous consumers are eaten by secondary and tertiary consumers, which are carnivorous and omnivorous. For example, the Arctic wolf often hunts and feeds on caribou. Also, the snowy owl feeds on the Arctic hare. These are predator-prey relationships between first-level heterotrophs and second and third-level consumers. In the center of the food web, organisms are both predators and prey. Rock ptarmigans, snow geese, seals, snowy owls, ermines, snow buntings, and gyrfalcons are consumers that are also preyed upon by higher-level consumers. At the upper part of the food chain, Arctic wolves, Arctic foxes, and polar bears are the top consumers.
There are 5 different interactions and relationships between animals: competition, predation, parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. Competition is an interaction between animals where both organisms are harmed due to competition over resources. Animals in the tundra don't face much competition. The size and climate of the biome prevents sources of food from surviving, but when food is scarce, some animals compete for food sources. In the tundra, the ermine, snowy owl, and Arctic fox all compete for lemming. Predation is the preying of one animal on others. An example of predation in the tundra occurs when polar bears prey on seal. Other examples of predation in the tundra include ermines eating lemmings and Arctic hares. Parasitism is an interaction between organisms where a parasite eats the cell contents of its host, harming the host but not killing them immediately. In the tundra, liver tapeworm cysts feed off of animals like moose, caribou, and wolves. Tapeworms feed on the food that is consumed by these animals, leading to malnutrition of the animal's body. Mutualism is an interaction when both species benefit from the relationship. A well-known example of mutualism in the tundra involves lichen. Lichen is moss-like and engages in a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and an algae. The fungus feeds off of sugars by photosynthetic algae, and the algae receives protection from the fungus. The relationship between the two is mutualistic in nature since both organisms benefit, in this case from protection and a source of food. Commensalism is where one animal benefits and the other isn't harmed or helped. In the tundra, an example of commensalism is when the Arctic fox benefits from the caribou. The caribou walk around the tundra, unearthing snow, which allows Arctic foxes to eat the food that the caribou unearths. The caribou is not harmed in the process, but the Arctic fox is helped, demonstrating an example of commensalism.
Within the tundra, population densities can differ substantially, creating contrasting patterns of dispersion. The most common pattern of dispersion is clumped, in which individuals are aggregated into patches. In the tundra, ringed seals form clumped patterns of dispersion. Most seals give birth in lairs, and they live in colonies for most of their lifetime. Between colonies, miles of tundra exist, creating specific and obvious groups. Therefore, the ringed seals demonstrate a clumped pattern of dispersion. A uniform or evenly spaced pattern of dispersion may result from direct interactions between individuals in a population. Animals often exhibit uniform dispersion as a result of antagonistic social interactions, such as territoriality, which is a defense of a physical space against encroachment by other individuals. In the tundra, ermines exhibit uniform dispersion patterns. Since they are territorial organisms, each adult ermine defends themselves and their young, spreading out the population in an even manner. Uniform patterns in the tundra and in most other biomes are rarer than clumped patterns. In random dispersion, the position of each individual in a population is completely independent of the other individuals. This can be due to uncontrolled or forced movement, like in the dispersal of seeds. In the tundra, sedge demonstrates random dispersion. The sedge plant is a type of achene, a small seed-like fruit containing one seed. These seeds are dispersed throughout the tundra through flotation, by adhering to passing organisms, by ant activity, by wind, and also by traveling through digestive tracts of seed-eating organisms and being released in other areas. A graphic method of representing some of the data in a life table is a survivorship curve, a plot of the proportion or numbers in a population of a single organism still alive at each stage of their lives. Type 3 curves drop sharply at the start, reflecting very high death rates for the young, but flatten out as death rates decline for those few individuals that survive the early period of die-off. This type of curve is usually associated with organisms that produce very large numbers of offspring but provide little or no care in early life. The lemming is a type 3 organism because it is a small animal, is delivered in large litters, and has unsuccessful survival rates in early life due to being easy prey at a young age.
Plants and animals are unable to use the nitrogen in the atmosphere unless it is converted to a usable form. Nitrogen first goes from the atmosphere to the ground. Animals such as Arctic foxes, polar bears, and moose waste goes into the ground. Decomposers such as fungi and bacteria break down the waste by converting the nitrogen into ammonia, and that is when the plants can use it to support their growth. Ammonia and ammonium, located in the soil, convert the nitrogen and the waste to nitrites. Nitrites are then converted to nitrates. When an animal eats the plant, the nitrogen goes from one organism to another. When a plant and animal dies, they would decompose into the ground, releasing the nitrogen from their body. The reservoir of nitrogen goes back into fixation by nitrogen fixing bacteria or goes back into the ground as fertilizer, and from there back to the steppes. Factors such as fossil fuels and combustion release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Plants living in the tundra take up the carbon dioxide during summer. Plants absorb it along with sunlight and water when they carry out photosynthesis. The carbon then builds up. In the winter, the plants die and the carbon dioxide is trapped and stored under permafrost and removed from the atmosphere. The permafrost later melts and simultaneously plants are decomposing, releasing carbon dioxide. In the Arctic, these natural processes are significantly slowed down because of the cold climate. Therefore, the tundra becomes like a carbon sink, taking more carbon dioxide in and getting back into the atmosphere when it decomposes. The tundra gets very little precipitation. It doesn't get much rain because when it rains, most of the water will turn into ice below the soil. When precipitation does fall, it hits the ground and is either soaked into the ground as permafrost or goes back into the ocean and is evaporated. The few plants that grow in the tundra take in water when available. The little water that does melt flows down a river. The river water may either be consumed by an animal that lives in the tundra and then transpired into the air, or flow into the ocean, where the water may evaporate and become a cloud to start the process over again. Over time, rain and weathering causes rocks to release phosphate ions and other minerals. This inorganic phosphate is then distributed in soils and water. Plants take up the inorganic phosphate from the soil. The plants may then be consumed by animals. Once in the plant or animal, the phosphate is incorporated into organic molecules such as DNA. When the plant or animal dies, it decays, and the organic phosphate is returned to the soil. Within the soil, organic forms of phosphate can be made available to plants by bacteria that break down organic matter to inorganic forms of phosphorus. This process is known as mineralization. Phosphorus in soil can end up in waterways and eventually oceans. Once there, it can be incorporated into sediments over time.
An example of human disturbance in the tundra is due to the amount of resources located in the biome for human extraction. Large reserves of oil, natural gas, diamonds, and other minerals have been found beneath the tundra, causing the construction of roads and drilling operations. This construction has a negative effect on the fragile environment and also indirectly affects the animal and plant life in the ecosystem. Dust from construction has the ability to negatively impact plants and lichen. The drilling of oil also increases the potential for oil spills. With an increase in human interaction in the tundra, the biome is experiencing an increasingly negative impact due to human disturbance. Recently, the Trump administration began advocating for drilling in the Arctic. Specifically, in December, the U.S. Senate passed a bill allowing oil drilling in the Arctic. The Arctic Refuge has long since been an environmental refuge for the protection of the fragile atmosphere. The tundra biome is already at high risk due to other human factors such as global warming, and the drilling of oil and other resources would only continue to taint the pure landscape.